In 2009, a researcher at Barnard College ran an experiment that quietly wrecked a myth millions of pet owners believed with their whole hearts. She told dog owners to leave the room. Then she told them a lie. Some were told their dog had eaten a forbidden treat. Some were told the truth. And here is the part that should stop you cold. The dogs who looked the most guilty were often the ones who had done nothing wrong at all. For years, you probably watched a dog lower its head, avoid your eyes, tuck its tail, and thought, "It knows. It feels bad." But what you are about to discover is far stranger and far more personal than that. Because the question isn't really about dogs. It's about you. It's about whether feeling sorry after doing something wrong is a moral emotion, something ancient and shared, or just a very convincing performance your nervous system learned in order to survive you. Let's start with what shame actually is, underneath the word. Shame is not the same as fear. Fear says, something bad is coming. Shame says, something is wrong with me. It's a self-directed emotion. It requires a kind of mental mirror, a version of yourself that you can step back from and judge. Scientists call this self-referential cognition, which is just a formal way of saying the ability to think about your own thinking. For a long time, researchers assumed only humans had that mirror. Then, one careful experiment at a time, the animal kingdom started raising its hand. Take the dog study again, led by psychologist Alexandra Horowitz. What her research actually revealed wasn't that dogs feel nothing. It revealed something almost more interesting. Dogs are exquisite readers of human body language. When you scold a dog, or even just look at it a certain way, its whole body responds to your energy, not necessarily to a memory of its own wrongdoing. That guilty look you know so well, the ears back, the eyes wide and soft, the body low to the ground, might be closer to appeasement than confession. A social signal that means, please don't be angry at me, rather than, I know exactly what I did. Think about how specific that finding is. It means a dog can produce the entire outward appearance of guilt without ever having broken a rule, which tells you something important before you go any further. The face of shame and the feeling of shame might not be the same thing at all, in dogs or in anyone. So does that mean animals can't feel anything like shame? Not so fast. Here's where it gets complicated, in the best way. Primatologist Frans de Waal spent decades studying chimpanzees and bonobos, and he observed something you don't expect from an animal supposedly incapable of morality. When a chimpanzee breaks a social rule, say, it steals food from a lower-ranking troop member while a dominant animal watches, it doesn't simply flee the scene. Sometimes it hunches its shoulders. It avoids eye contact with the group. It goes quiet, almost small, in a way that mirrors what a human does after being caught in an embarrassing mistake at work or in front of friends. De Waal called this part of a much bigger picture. The roots of morality itself may not be uniquely human. They may be ancient, layered into the nervous systems of every species that has ever needed a group to survive. But that's not even the strangest part. Elephants offer one of the most haunting examples in the entire animal behavior record. Researchers studying wild elephant herds have documented individuals who, after an aggressive outburst toward a family member, will approach that same individual later and perform a kind of reconciliation, touching trunks, standing close, body against body, in a way that looks nothing like accident and everything like intention. A behavior that resembles, structurally, almost exactly an apology. Now, an elephant cannot tell you in words that it feels regret. It cannot write you a note explaining itself. But its body, its choices, its deliberate return to the one it wronged, tell a story that is very hard to explain away as pure instinct, with no feeling attached to it at all. Picture it for a moment. A herd, dust rising off the ground, the low rumble elephants use to communicate across distance. One animal lashes out, the others scatter, startled, and later, quietly, without any human ever teaching it to do so, that same animal returns. It doesn't ask for forgiveness in words. It asks with its body. And the other elephant, more often than not, lets it back in. Think about your own body for a second, right now, as you're listening to this. When you feel ashamed, what happens physically? Your shoulders round forward, Your chin drops toward your chest. You avoid eye contact, even with people who love you. You want to disappear, physically, into a smaller version of yourself. This isn't a coincidence across species. Researchers who study emotional expression argue that this exact posture, the shrinking, the head lowering, the gaze aversion, shows up again and again across highly social mammals, from primates to canines to elephants. It's not proof of an identical inner experience in every case, but it is proof that the biological machinery for social self-correction runs deep, and it runs old, far older than language, far older than culture. If you've made it this far into a video about elephants apologizing and dogs performing guilt they don't feel, you're probably someone who notices these small, strange overlaps between animals and people more than most. This channel is built for exactly that kind of curiosity. A quick subscribe helps more of these stories find their way to you. So why would evolution bother building something as uncomfortable as shame in the first place? Here's the theory that changes how you see the whole question. Shame isn't a punishment handed down from some moral authority in the sky. It's a repair tool. In highly social species, the ones that survive long enough to reproduce aren't the strongest individuals in the group. They're the ones who can stay inside the group, who can keep their place in the web of relationships that keeps them fed, protected, and alive. Staying inside the group means correcting yourself before the group corrects you first, sometimes permanently. Shame, in this light, isn't fundamentally about morality at all, not originally. It's about belonging. An animal, or a human, that can sense when it has damaged a relationship and adjust its behavior accordingly, has a massive survival advantage over one that simply cannot register the damage at all. And this is where it gets harder to look away. If shame evolved to protect belonging, then it makes sense that the animals who show the clearest shame-like behavior are the ones who live inside the tightest social bonds. Wolves, who depend on the pack for every ambush. Elephants, who mourn, remember, and travel together across generations. Chimpanzees, locked in constant, shifting alliances. Dogs, who spent tens of thousands of years evolving specifically to read human emotion and stay welcome inside our households. Meanwhile, species that live largely alone, that never had to negotiate a complex web of relationships to survive, show almost nothing that resembles this behavior at all, which suggests shame isn't a moral badge handed out to the most intelligent species on the planet. It's a social tool handed out specifically to the species that needed it in order to survive together. Now here's the twist that researchers still argue about at conferences, sometimes loudly. Even when an animal shows every outward sign of shame, the lowered head, the avoidance, the careful reconciliation gesture, we genuinely do not know, and may never know, if there is an inner experience sitting behind it. This is called the problem of other minds, and it's one of the oldest puzzles in all of science. You cannot climb inside an elephant's head and feel what it feels from the inside. You can only observe the behavior from the outside and infer what might be happening beneath it. Some scientists argue the behavior itself is enough, that if it looks like shame and functions like shame, we should call it shame. Others argue that without language, without any way to confirm an inner narrative, calling it shame is projecting a very human story onto a very different, very alien kind of mind. But maybe that disagreement is actually the most honest place science can land on a question this personal. Because here's the modern mirror hiding underneath all of this. You have almost certainly felt shame today, or sometime this week, over something small. A comment you replayed in your head at midnight, a mistake at work you can't stop reliving, turning over and over like a stone in your pocket. And in that exact moment, your body did precisely what a chimpanzee does after breaking a social rule in front of its troop. It made you smaller. It made you check in, want to repair, want to make absolutely sure the bond with the other person wasn't actually broken. You were not being irrational, and you were certainly not overreacting. You were running an ancient cross-species program that has kept social animals connected to one another for millions of years, long before either of you had a word for what you were feeling. The dog lowering its head at the sound of your voice, the elephant returning, slowly, to the one it hurt. And you, wide awake at 2 a.m, replaying an awkward conversation you already apologized for. All three of you might be running the same ancient software, just written into very different bodies, shaped by very different lives. So the next time you catch a dog giving you that famous guilty look on the kitchen floor, or you read about an elephant reconciling quietly with its herd after a long day, remember what the science actually says. It might not be proof of guilt exactly the way you experience it, wrapped in language and memory and self-judgment, but it is proof that you are not nearly as alone in this feeling as you were taught to believe. Shame, it turns out, may be one of the oldest threads connecting you to the rest of the animal kingdom, not a wall that separates you from it. In 2009, a study quietly proved that a guilty look doesn't always mean guilt, but it also proved something else along the way, something far more interesting than the headline suggested. It proved that the line between animal instinct and human emotion is a lot blurrier than any of us were ever taught to believe, and that the space between a dog's lowered head and your own quiet apology might be smaller than it looks. Have you ever watched an animal act like it truly knew it had done something wrong? Leave a comment and tell that story. And if this changed the way you see the animals around you, a like helps this reach someone who needs to feel it too. Thank you for watching.